This week on the Inside Athletic Training Podcast, we're joined by Dr. Adam Feit of Springfield College. Dr. Feit specializes in high-performance consulting across sports psychology, strength and conditioning, coaching education, and nutrition. Adam currently serves as the program director and assistant professor in the Department of Exercise Science at Springfield College. He brings a unique perspective on mental performance and its impact on athletic trainers working with athletes at every level. Enjoy the show. All right, Adam, welcome to the Inside Athletic Training Podcast. Excited to have you on the show today as a first-time guest. You're currently working at Springfield College as the program director and assistant professor of exercise science, and also a fieldwork coordinator for both undergrad and graduate strength and conditioning programs. But, from knowing you just briefly, there's a lot more to your story and to what you do than just what we listed there. So we'll get into your career, your experience with athletic trainers and all that good stuff pretty soon. But to get started, for the listeners out there who aren't familiar with your work, let's take it back to the beginning. Where are you from? Were you an athlete growing up? And how'd you gain a passion for all things sports medicine and performance?
Yeah, we might have to book 2 hours for this one, Sam. Been quite a storied career that I'm very privileged to still have a role in with everything that's happening. But, first off, thanks for having me on. It was great to touch base when we were out in Utah and really just get a deeper understanding of all the great work you're doing in PBATS and obviously supporting the health, fitness, and medical profession. But if I could wrap it up, I know we've got a great list of questions here. Grew up in Western Massachusetts, so very close by to Springfield College. Never thought I would attend Springfield College. I think like many student athletes, which I was one, you hit that 17, 18 years old and you're like, I'm getting out of here. I want to go see the world and whatnot. And if it wasn't for my athletic trainer in high school, I have no idea what I'd be doing and where I would be going. So all credit goes to my athletic trainer, Kevin Offrey, who was our athletic trainer at Chicopee Comprehensive High School, where I was a multi-sport athlete, basketball, track and field, and specialized in football as I got a little bit older. And imagine being 17 years old, captain of the football team, thinking you got your life figured out. You're in your preseason scrimmage a week before your first game as a captain and a new head coach. And you go up for a pass, you come down with the pass, but before you grab the pass, a defender takes your legs out and 250 pounds of you come slamming down and you snap your left humerus in half. So that's my origin story.
Yeah,
and while I didn't go directly into athletic training, it was that experience hanging out on the sidelines, going through, probably some things that we'll talk about in terms of identity crises and whatnot.
Sure.
And no idea. And if it wasn't for him and the conversations we had on our sideline, Kevin was just straight up and he was like, Adam, you got to go into strength conditioning. Like everything you're doing with captain's workouts and team workouts and your ability to understand programming and science, like there's a career for that. And I had no idea, right? Strength conditioning in terms of personal training, or it from physical education. And I knew I wanted to do neither. And sure enough, Springfield College ended up being literally the next town over. Had an opportunity to come here. And my ultimate goal was to become a Division I head strength conditioning coach. I remember writing the senior paper that I was going to be the head strength conditioning coach at Notre Dame. I was going to be married with 2 kids and have a pet bulldog. And so I achieved just about all of those: marriage, 2 kids. Did not make it to Notre Dame, but I was the head coach at a Division I university before heading to the NFL. And I have a lab instead of a bulldog. So all things considered, it really was that defining moment in a student athlete career at 17 years old. And from there, the story continues. Hopped right on the bandwagon of coaching, wanted to get to Division I as possible. Very fortunate, a lot of practical experiences along the way. And that shifted me around from collegiate strength conditioning to private sector strength conditioning to eventually owning my own facility with a partner down in Jersey. Springfield College gives us a call back and says, hey, do you ever think about coming back to school? And I said, well, that's a big decision now. I'm married and have kids and I'm running my own business. I was doing some online work at the time as well. And that's all my wife needed to hear about going back to school, opportunity for her, opportunity for us. And so we picked up from Jersey, came back to Springfield in 2017, went for our PhDs and ended up getting hired during and shortly after when we were done. And here we are today.
That's awesome, and quite the extensive list of experience you have, which we'll run through because so much of your work is kind of started in strength and conditioning, as you mentioned, but there's much more in terms of nutrition, mental performance, overall athletic performance, working with athletic trainers, like we mentioned. Want to walk through kind of your steps along the way. So, assistant strength and conditioning coach at Louisville, some time at Eastern Michigan. Time, as you mentioned, with the Carolina Panthers and the NFL and so forth, and all kind of along the lines of the strength and conditioning. Walk us through those experiences, and then also kind of when the shift came to invest more time of yours into learning about the mental performance aspect of sports as well.
Yeah, great question. So really, throughout my internship experiences prior to going to Louisville, it was all strength conditioning. It was mostly football derived. Okay. And I did some work with the Olympic Training Center. And that's where I really started to get this idea of what we now call like the high performance model, where the strength coach isn't just in the weight room 3 floors below sea level, right? The ATs aren't just in the athletic training room, taping ankles and bagging ice. That was the first exposure I got of, what does really high performance look like? And at the Olympic level, obviously you're working with the world's greatest athletes, right?
Sure.
So took that experience back with me to Springfield, went to the Citadel for my master's degree, started there, and then got the call up to go to Division I. And again, very integrated, right? When you are football only, and obviously with baseball, athletic training, I mean, that's the only team you worry about. So you've got open windows, you got rooms right next to each other. Everybody is dialed in on exactly what needs to be done, who needs to do it, and who needs to know about it. So great experience there. Unfortunately, as you know, working at high levels, right, we're leaving the satisfaction and our stability of our jobs and our marriages up to a bunch of, 18 to 22-year-olds. And again, this is before NILs. This is before contracts. This is before all of these bargaining agreements and what's happening in today's athletics. And as rightfully so, you don't win, people get fired, but I was able to keep my job. So I was actually the only strength coach on staff and one of only 2 coaches total to be retained by the new staff coming in. And that was a pivotal moment for me because I saw the new type of coaching style. I saw the new people bringing in. And I also knew what I was still lacking was development and mentorship, and didn't think I'd rush to becoming a head coach. But as the dominoes fall during the hiring and firing season that we're seeing now, an opportunity came up, and that's where I took a bet on myself. And I said, you know what? I'm never going to be ready. Everybody's going to ask me if you are. You just have to figure it out as you go. And so at 24, I was the youngest head strength coach in Division I. Albeit maybe one of the worst universities from a win-loss record, but you talk about growth and experience and just learning the inner workings of an athletic department, whether it was good, bad, or indifferent. I learned so much in that year of what to do, what not to do, and the importance of the softer side of what we're going to be talking about with mental performance.
Sure.
Did a year there. Got pulled up to the NFL, and that was, I won't say the nail in the coffin. I think there's probably a nicer way of saying this, where it was the hardest year of my life, and it was the most needed year of my life, because there, as we're talking about professional athletics, as we know, everything comes down to that transactional report where are we, how available are our players? And at the end of the day, like, are we going to make the postseason? And it was at that time where I started to evaluate, again, I married a strength conditioning coach, had followed me along my career, and a little bit of a loss of identity there, starting a family, got married, bought a house, found out, she was pregnant very quickly, which we're very thankful for. And then things just kind of slowed down. They needed to slow down because I saw what my life was going to turn into. I saw the coaches that I was working with that, again, not to be ageist, in their 60s and 70s, just riding it out because that's all they knew. They became, essentially institutionalized to professional sports. And that wasn't a life that I wanted. And it wasn't a life that I wanted to start with my new bride and my best friend, where all of a sudden, I'm home 3-4 hours a day total, right?
Yeah.
Or the quality of life wasn't great. And it was at that time where I realized I needed some help. And that's where I reached out to our athletic training staff and I said, hey, I'm kind of struggling a little bit here of this new change. And again, I got there at 25. So there was a lot of growing up still to do. And that's where I found sports psychology. And I met with Dr. Mark Tobin and was just instrumental on just how to look at the things happening in my life, right? Whether it was victim mode or the idea of, transaction versus transformational, whatever the case may be. That was my first real insight into, okay, like sports psychology isn't just sitting on a couch and getting therapy, nor is it at all in the realms of like, tell me about your childhood and your relationship with your parents. Everything was performance-based.
Yeah.
So I kind of latched on that a little bit. I said, all right, found a private sector opportunity, open up a place with an athlete that I met online who's my best friend to this day. But it wasn't until I started working with Precision Nutrition, which was at one point the largest nutrition coaching and certification software company in the world, based out of Toronto, Canada. A fantastic mentor there, and it just really great stuff. And where the psychology shift happened was they weren't looking at nutrition coaching from macros. They weren't looking at it from meal plans. They weren't looking at it from discipline or willpower. It was all psychologically based. And once I started to work in that realm of helping coaches coach their clients better and looking at the behaviors that athletes and clients were making about food had nothing to do with whether it was healthy or not. That's where I started to think, you know what, maybe there is something to this mental side of the game. And so I had been there about 5 years, and an opportunity had come up again, as I said earlier, Springfield College. I said, we've got some PhD programs, and we only had 3 at the time. So we've got essentially teaching administration, exercise physiology, and sport and exercise psychology. They've kind of changed a little bit, but right away, my wife and I said, we can't do the same program. That's not going to be good for us. So she decided to go the teaching and administrative route. And I said, you know what? I think this is a time where I really go all in on sport and exercise psychology. And I'm so thankful I did, because obviously how you and I had connected about this space between the ears, that is something that as athletic trainers, as strength conditioning coaches, and now as a professor, they may not be the most objective measures of, are they ready to play? Are they ready to return? Is that the reason why they won, right? So we have a lot of conversations about the effectiveness of this. And research is very clear. This is a very powerful tool and an appendage of that high performance model. And so really it was my experience working online and understanding things from a coaching perspective was more psychologically based than physiologically based. And that brought me into the world of being a former student athlete, working in high level sport, the instant credibility that came with that. So eventually I went for my advanced certification there with our national association, and here we are today. And so now I'm able to leverage my athletic playing experience, my coaching experience, and now my sports psychology experience, where I can be a consultant to, which I am now, to professional sports teams, to professional athletes, and doing a lot of work inside our communities as well.
That's great expertise there from you. And obviously it comes with time, as you mentioned, when you're 25 and you're kind of taking on a new role, and inside there's so much room for you to grow and stuff that needs to happen. One thing that kind of really is cool to me is kind of your relationship between so many different groups. So these performance staffs are growing at a rapid rate, from strength to nutrition, athletic trainers, team doctors, directors of analytics and high performance. There's so many different job titles that are extremely important to the overall goal, which is winning and improving player performance, keeping players on the field at their best. Talk about the relationship between those groups, specifically, obviously PBAT's home to Major League Baseball athletic trainers. Talk about your relationship in your career with athletic trainers, and how those mental performance coaches and strength coaches kind of work in tandem with the athletic training staffs.
Yeah, and I appreciate that question, Sam, because that's really the hallmark of my research now, is trying to improve the pathways and understanding of how these support staff members can work symbiotically and congruently, because at the end of the day, right, we're all sitting in the same room, we're in the same seats, and we all want what's best for the organization. So a lot of my work now is work with, how do strength conditioning coaches, how can they utilize psychological or mental skills to enhance their athletes' performance, to enhance their coaching effectiveness? And a lot of it did come from research and athletic training in the medical field, because we know that as ATs start to integrate a little bit more of the psychological measures. Now, again, we're not talking about licensed counseling. We're not talking about being a clinical psychologist, but as athletic trainers, and we talked a little bit about this in Utah, we're essentially, and I say we in terms of strength conditioning coaches, we're seeing the athletes the most, right? We're seeing them at their most vulnerable times, when they're in moments of pain and frustration, uncertainty, vulnerability, the whole thing. And what a great opportunity that we can work on these softer skills of performance and actually help them through their rehab, their return to play process, and the communication that has to happen. And it has to happen in 2 ways, right? I think oftentimes in communication, it's got to be hot. It's got to be honest. It's got to be open, and it's got to be 2 ways. And I think there's a lot of athletic trainers and there's a lot of strength conditioning coaches that have maybe felt that friction over the years as they built their career, as very much I have, where maybe the athletic trainer has a different background or doesn't agree with how the strength coach is targeting some of the return to play stuff. Maybe the strength coaches feel very strongly about a certain staff there. And as you climb through the levels, and obviously being in professional baseball, you really try to have to anchor down in and put any philosophical differences aside of saying, are we doing what's best for the athlete? Are we truly providing athlete-centered care? And where now we bring in the mental performance professional is now that's kind of the in-between person, right? How can I get some information? Again, we're all on the same team with the athlete. How can I get information with the athletic trainer? How can I communicate? And how is that displaying in workouts or rehab, whatever the case may be? And while the strength coach is very much focused on enhancing physical performance, and athletic trainers might be very well focused on enhancing those qualities to prevent or mitigate, reduce the severity, or essentially rehab them back to performance, the mental performance professional is in a really nice place of taking in all of this data and have to have the skill of distributing, is this a signal, is this noise, but distributing it down to the athlete of making sure that we're celebrating those wins in the training, on the treatment table. We're celebrating those small wins inside the weight room. And then when we get back to performance, a big part of that is, reestablishing their confidence, right? Making sure that their expectations are actually matching reality and being a sounding board for them too. And I think that's really, really important because, as I said earlier, it's not just sitting on a couch and complaining about playing time or not being on the roster or getting scratched or getting traded. It's about taking all of these physical qualities and helping them express them so that when they do express them, they're doing them in the moments that matter most. And that's in front of managers, that's in front of scouts, that's in front of front office staff, and having that relationship that is very permeable. And that's an important term because we can't have these amazing professionals in silos. We can't be in these closed door office meetings all the time. We need to continue, and we're doing, I think, a better job of really co-integrating so that we're all doing what's best for the future of the profession.
Yeah, Adam, that's a great point you made about the strength coach and the athletic trainer being one of the most consistent presences in an athlete's life on a day-to-day basis. I think that's hugely important. I remember back in my time, as an athlete in college and yours as well, you spend so much time on that training table. You don't want to, but you end up there inevitably. And you really form a close bond where it is almost like you're sitting with a therapist, but it's in a different atmosphere and you're so comfortable. Why does it matter, in your opinion, to improve mental performance that these people, athletic trainers specifically, are so close with these athletes and are so involved every single day of their life?
Yeah. And I think, right to it, I always talk about the best ability is availability, right? Sure. And I think the second piece, and again, I can be wrong, it's having the availability to have those concerns be expressed, but it's also having the adaptability to shift. And that could be treatment plans, that could be workout plans, whatever the case may be. But I think, like, if we look at how athletic trainers have evolved, even just the last decade, it's moved well beyond just purely physical care, right? So because of that availability, whether they're early hours, whether they're long hours, whether they're doing practices, you're on the buses, you're on the planes, you're in the hotels. Like, I've lived that life, right?
Yeah.
Athletic trainers, you're going to have a greater awareness of mental and emotional readiness, right? And this will show up in the conversations that you have with your athletes. You are at the forefront of, like, this athlete-centered communication. There is a gap that needs to be filled. You need to get back into the roster. You need to get off the IR, whatever the case may be. And so hopefully, because of the availability and because of the genuine, and in coaching, we call that, the coach-athlete relationship, very much similar to a trainer-athlete relationship. In counseling, they call that the therapeutic alliance. If you don't have that component, are athletes really going to tell you that they don't hurt as bad, right? Are they really going to tell you that they had issues with this type of treatment modality, whatever the case may be? At the end of the day, they're going to say what needs to be said so that we write down in our notes and our programs that, yeah, they're ready to go. But
exactly.
I think what makes it, because of the availability and the adaptability, it's so important because there's such an enhanced involvement in the return to play decision making. And that's including enhancing and reestablishing their confidence, minimizing their fear, and then the trust in the body. And so we said it a little bit in Utah, but now more than ever, I think, as programs expand, you're adding physical therapists to staff, you're adding sports psychology professionals, nutrition staff. There's so many people that are truly, like, informal first responders. And we see that a lot now from the mental and emotional stressors that are happening, whether you are formally trained in it or not. And that's my crusade.
That's a great point. Right? Yeah.
we shy away from anything about mental health. We shy away when we hear things like anxiety and depression, right? And it's knowing your scope, right? I very much appreciate and respect the scope of practice from an athletic training perspective, just as much as they respect mine as a performance coach. But we take classes. We need continued professional education. And we need to remember that, again, there's more than just, are they mobile enough? Are they stable enough? Can they express these physical qualities? Because now, whether we're trained or not, these are the concerns and these are the issues that our athletes are bringing to us because it comes down to that foundation of trust.
Mm-hmm. And to kind of piggyback off that, when an athlete faces an injury, an uphill battle, something that derails their season or career, is there a certain time frame, that you see the biggest mental challenges arise? And also, what do you think, is the best course of action for athletic trainers to help them address those challenges when maybe that's not something they want to talk about, at the current moment?
Yeah. So I think it really comes down to a spectrum of opportunities here. I don't like to say it's binary, like it's always at the
Mm-hmm.
beginning or it's always at the end. But in a
Sure.
way, right, and you and I both know, right, rehab is, as much as we want it to be linear, it's never the case, right?
Mm-hmm.
Everybody responds differently. The defining moments are clearly when an injury happens and respecting the space. And I have this conversation with my students as well. They need some time to grieve. They need some time to cope, right?
Yeah.
But having that support system. So let's say the onset of injury, and then I'll say the next biggest point will be the onset of return to play, right? And so that could be obviously at the very beginning, and that can be at the very end. I think those are the two big defining moments on how athletic trainers can initiate care. And again, it may not be you, but it's
Mm-hmm.
understanding, hey, here's who we have in your corner. Here are some things that we're going to integrate into your rehab plan. And again, we're practicing mental skills. It's visualization, it's imagery, it's proper goal setting and so forth. And what's going to happen when you've been rehabbing for 4 to 6 weeks and the team doc says, hey, you should be good in 2 to 3. Now you're losing motivation, or now you're more motivated to prove them wrong. And so whenever it's an injury, but it could be anything. It could be a loss of a role on a team, right? You go from starter to practice squad, you could get traded. And again, the world of baseball, there's so many different divisions and levels, right? It can be like a carousel, right?
Yeah.
There's the fear of re-injury. When the injury is happening, I think obviously feeling the disconnection between teammates and coaches. Now I'm not a contributor. Well, guess who you're spending your time with? You're hanging out with the trainers and coaches on the sidelines or in the dugouts, right? I think there's an opportunity here when the pressure to come back too soon to prove themselves. Maybe it's a contract year, whatever the case may be, but really that uncertainty about trying to return. And are you going to be as fast? Are you going to be as strong? Are you going to be as calm and collected as you once were? And so I mean, some basic advice, I'm sure we'll go into it more, but as athletic trainers, how can we, number one, normalize your emotional response, right? Whether we agree with it or not, we have to remember that, again, like the big caveat we say, right? They're humans before they're athletes. And so we're all going to
Mm-hmm.
have some sort of emotional response, and it could be regulated, it could be dysregulated, but normalizing that as a person. I think reinforcing progress instead of definitive timelines, and that's always a catch-all one, right? Especially
Yeah.
pressures to get back onto the field, helping them stay connected to the team and to the purpose. And this is where I challenge, athletic trainers to continue to advocate for the athlete, for their safety with the key stakeholders, right? Don't let them become just a number or falling out what I call the depth chart when you're having those conversations with front office staff and managers and GMs and so forth. Because a lot of these, as I said earlier, right, these emotional hurdles, they're not going to show up on a chart, right? You can't take a
Yeah.
goniometer to the brain and being like, well, the range of motion here is not where we'd want it to be. But
Yeah.
again, go back to the importance of notes, the importance of conversations, and the importance of documentation. It's very critical because if these athletes are going to share these moments, we have to make sure that we're on the closest page possible. But we also got to remember, like, are we even in the same book? Are we even in the same chapter? Because you and I, as professionals, can think one thing, and then the athletes can think another thing. And then all of a sudden, whatever they express or don't express to the people that make those decisions, if those aren't in alignment, then we've got an alignment and assignment issue here from an organization.
Yeah. That's great. I really like where you mentioned, the emotional hurdles don't always show up on the medical chart. And that's something that's extremely important for athletic trainers to be able to understand. In your opinion, athletic trainers are dealing with the physical and the mental side of these athletes. When an athlete isn't willing to admit they're feeling down or struggling, or, they're fine, they tell you, during rehab or something like that. What can athletic trainers pay attention to maybe recognize mental struggles, or get kind of deeper than, just taking the athlete's word for what it is and, hey, I'm fine.
Well, I love how you say that because that's the number one thing, right? And I'm a parent. I've got a 13 and 11-year-old, and it's the same thing. How was school? It was fine. How was practice? It was fine. So those right there are your red flags, right? They're very skilled. Think about just the body from a physical. We are the ultimate compensators, right? If something doesn't feel right, I've got a jacked up shoulder, I've got some scapular dyskinesis, I'm going to find a way to bench press, right?
Mm-hmm.
Until I can't anymore. We are naturally evolutionary creatures to compensate. And athletes are so skilled at masking how stress is impacting their bodies until, right, the tolerance has been broken. So what are some common red flags? One is shorter answers or disengagement, right, to these questions that you're asking. There's going to be irritability. There could be some emotional flatness, right? There's no juice. There's just no purpose to live or show up, right? Maybe they're kind of straggling into the treatment room or the AT room a little bit later, or just not as much zest. They could be rushing through rehab, right? Or they could be avoiding it altogether. So I think these are some red flags to keep an eye on. And I think one thing, I was talking about it with somebody this morning, also an overcompliance to the rehab plan without curiosity, right?
Okay.
Everybody's going to do, you hope, what you want them to do. But are they so rigid and structured where they're just following it with no emotional response? And I think that's a red flag there too, because
Interesting.
you eventually want them to ask why, right? You're not looking to defend all of your actions. Obviously, they trust you. But I would love to have a conversation of, hey, we're using this modality for this, and this is going to help you there. If they're just going through the motions and you're bending them around and you're doing this and you're doing that, and there's no, again, back to hot communication, there's nothing two-way, I think that's a red flag to look at as well. And then I think the easiest one is, right, just like sudden changes in body language or tone. And so being aware of that, and again, we talk about this all the time in psychology, we want to produce action. We want to put together an action plan. You can't devote and you can't promote action without awareness. And a lot of that times, I think that comes down to us as professionals, whether it's athletic trainers or coaches, but also have the self-awareness within yourself, but also the environmental and situational awareness. Because if we take time to actually notice and name what's happening around us or what could be happening from that athlete's perspective, it can open up such a powerful conversation, which we'll get to in terms of like the things to work on, that will give us the answers. We will get answers from them if we take the time to slow down and acknowledge what's happening around us.
Let's pause for a quick message from our partners at the United States Department of Labor's Office of Disability Employment Policy.
All of us have a role to play in promoting a mental health friendly workplace.
So what can I do to help?
As a CEO, I can set the tone for a supportive culture.
As a manager, I can offer assistance and accommodations.
As a coworker, I can be a source of support.
As someone with a mental health condition, I can ask for what I need to perform my best.
What can I do?
What can I do?
I can remind others that none of us are alone.
And that we all benefit from workplaces that promote good mental health.
Learn more at whatcanyoudocampaign.org.
Now, here's more from our conversation with Dr. Adam Feit. Yeah, I really like where you mentioned you want your athletes to be asking, why are we doing this? To remain curious about the process, to really be invested emotionally in the rehab, in the return to play plans. Well, Adam, in your experience, what separates a good communicator as an athletic trainer from a great communicator when the ultimate goal is to encourage that athlete to be curious, to engage, to be invested truly in their rehab and return to play plans?
Yeah. Great communicators, they do not just talk clearly. Great podcast interviews aren't just about energy and the lack of filler words. Great communicators listen intentionally. Everything comes down to, is it purpose-driven? And what is the function of this conversation? And how am I going to allow this conversation to give me what I'm looking for? And I think step one right there is, are you asking better questions? This goes back to the age-old fallacy of, is it a closed-ended question? Is it an open-ended question? If I ask you how your day is going, you're going to tell me whether it's truthful or not. It's fine, good, bad, whatever. How can we shift our closed-ended questioning into open-ended questioning? Because if we ask better questions, we will get better answers. And again, it seems so trivial, but I see it in training rooms. I see it in strength conditioning centers. I see it on the circuit of speaking, the questions that you're asking your audience, which in this case is the athlete, they're bad questions. And there's a lot of different ways that we can scale and ask these questions to get better answers. So that's step one, right? Is ask more open-ended questions. Step two, reflect back on kind of what you hear before you offer solutions. Again, we're in the position of being a helper, right? We want to help them get better, return to play, whatever the case may be. Oftentimes we're hearing what they're telling us, but we're not truly listening. So give yourself some space, build in some moments there to pause, take notes, whatever it might be, and then reflect back to them, right? Is this what I'm hearing, right? And this goes down, if there's any skill, any book, any athletic trainers, you want to work on communication, please read Motivational Interviewing. There has been a wealth of resources on this. It is a studied, tried and true tactic of understanding. And essentially, motivational interviewing is a good term for it, but we're interviewing them to understand where these motivations are coming from or where their lack of motivations are. So that is one of the best skills I picked up early in my career. And I can't recommend that resource, whether it's books, podcasts, or just general charts online that you can find. Motivational interviewing is huge. A couple other things, matching their energy. So you as an athletic trainer to their state, right? I talk about all the time in coaching, right? You want to be the thermostat, not the thermometer. Thermometers are going to go up and down around the situations. As a coach, it might be 6 a.m., it might be 6 p.m., it might be the seventh group of the day. You've got to set the tone. I think you got to be careful of that when you're working in a very high stress environment like post-injury or in the athletic training room. So having that ability to adapt and match their energy. Another one is avoiding the minimization of their experience, right? Oh, it's only this, right? I hate the word just, because just designifies the value of the next following words. So if you as an athletic trainer are saying, oh yeah, don't worry about it, it's just this. In our head, we're trying to logically rationalize that it's no big deal. But to them, and I say this to my students, their 10 is a 10. From an RPE scale to a pain threshold scale, you might, through all the research that we've done, think, oh, this is about a 4 out of 10. To them, it might be an 8. And if we use this old age model of like, you're not mentally tough enough, it's not that hard, whatever the case, we have to respect what it feels like in their body in that moment, because at the end of the day, they know their body better than us. So minimizing the avoidance of those experiences, not necessarily leveraging into it and leaning into it, but are we acknowledging it? And then I think another big one is, how consistent can you be, right? You're facing the pressure from the front office. The athletes are facing the pressure from their agents and scouts or whatever the case may be. Can you be level-headed? Can you not let your highs be too high? Can you not let your lows be too low? Because as you know, baseball is a very long season. Yeah. And all of a sudden there's a lot of baseball to play, but how consistent can you be, and how consistent can you be in your treatment and your communication and what those plans look like overall throughout the whole entire season?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, awesome advice there for the athletic trainers out there, either students or young professionals or even veterans who haven't considered maybe the mental aspects as much in terms of their clinical care. Adam, you mentioned athletic trainers operate in high stress environments, whether it's, working with an athlete trying to make a roster or making a run to the World Series. Like there's pressure. You have to win. Winning means keeping players healthy and on the field. That is your job, in its most basic form. And like I mentioned, those environments are stressful. When we look away from the athlete and more towards the athletic trainer and their own mental performance and well-being, what advice, and also how important it is for them to kind of prioritize their mental health with traveling and sleep being an issue? How should those athletic trainers focus on that for their own well-being while kind of trying to serve others at the same time?
Always easier said than done, right? And I think, unfortunately, when the pandemic hit, we saw a lot of this with compassion fatigue, right? It was the medical model. My mother's a nurse, and she would see it in the hospitals. When we're prioritizing the other needs of other people over ourselves, we can only do it for so long, right? So I think when you're an athletic trainer, you're always operating in a constant state of urgency without intentional self-care. And again, I'm not talking about bubble baths. I'm not talking about getting massages, right? I'm 40 years old, and I say this all the time. My self-care is like, if I get a new bar of Dr. Squatch soap, I'm just like, this is heaven, right? Like a cup of coffee, living the life, right? But it's those micro moments and realizing that, again, going back to what we talked about, it's things aren't ever really good or really bad. We're never really going to have a bad day, right? We might have a bad moment, but are we going to let that moment define us? So it's the same thing with self-care. You don't have to go all in, right? Your ability to display care for yourself will not include an all-inclusive paid trip until the season's over. And even that, right? You got other things to work on. So if we're not taking care of ourselves, right, we know, and research is very clear, and lived experiences, right? Your burnout increases, your patience decreases, your empathy drops, your communication suffers. All of a sudden, you're just that athletic trainer that nobody wants to be around, and you're using the same old excuses, right? I'm tired, I got a lot going on, guys are getting hurt, I'm getting pressure, and so forth, whatever it means. So how we can battle that, obviously, is prioritizing that, but also working on the mental skills, right? It's not even just athletes, it's us as professionals. So how is our emotional regulation, right? How are we able to regulate our response to hearing difficult news, or when this is a everybody must win moment, right? Having that ability to shift and understand what is happening and to not emotionally react, but actually to rationally respond. So that's a key mental skill. Active listening is another one. Boundary setting, and this is a tough one.
Sure,
I haven't mastered it yet, but immense kudos to our athletic training department here at Springfield College. One of the first integrators of this new model, where they're not at beck and call at all hours of the day, right? They've established clinic hours and open hours, right? They're rotating through their system. And again, that's not my department, but I can see that they're setting some boundaries while still providing the best care possible. And that is important because we want to do what's best for the organization, but at how long and how far are we going to do that when it comes at the expense of our own health? So within boundary setting, you've got stress management. We talked about self-awareness. And I think the big one, and I hate reducing a sports psychology PhD degree to this, is the ability to develop, maintain, and regulate confidence in these difficult situations called life, right? We can get sources of confidence from so many different areas, but you can't have confidence unless you have competence. But you won't have competence until you become courageous. Are you actively seeking out these opportunities to learn skills, to try new things? And are you developing into a competent professional? The idea of faking it till you make it is one of the worst pieces of advice I was ever told, and I was giving out, because it's resting on something that is unstable. You're resting on something that is a lie internally, right? Just get up there and just show them how much you know. Well,
can't lie to yourself.
Yeah, you can't. And if you're spending, and this goes back into what we call like the energy envelope in coaching, it's just like budgeting, it's just like macro counting. We only have so much in our energy envelope: $100 bills, $1 bills, $5 bills, everything that we do, but most importantly, everything that we're thinking about, it costs energy. So if I'm spending all this time trying to prove to myself that I am calm and I am capable, right? It's like a self-affirmation YouTube video that you're listening on the way to the stadium. Yeah. You're draining so much energy that you could be giving to others that might impact your boundaries, that could improve your confidence. So again, I hate to reduce it down. Almost every single situation I come across in mental performance comes down to some level of confidence that has been impacted by injury, by a change in a role in a team, or simply just the dynamics of working within an organization.
Yeah, super interesting stuff there, especially from the kind of mindset of the athletic training professional, not so much the athlete. And Adam, when we talked, when we first met, we talked a lot about that theme of confidence. And I had mentioned, some people build that confidence from preparation. They get in the batter's box, they're ready to go, or they get in the training room, they're ready to go because they're prepared. Some build it from success through having a successful rehab, gaining the trust of a player as an athletic trainer, something like that. But when that confidence leaves you and you're struggling, maybe it's your first year in the big leagues as an athletic trainer, maybe it's your first internship in pro sports and you really want it, but you're struggling, you messed up, the director, yelled at you or something,
Sure.
When that confidence goes away and deep down you can't lie to yourself, you're struggling, how do you get back on the train toward building that up again if you're really in a bad place?
Yep. Great question. I remember the conversation we had about that in Utah. If you can't be yourself, you have to remind yourself. And you said this earlier, the biggest source of this situational specific confidence, we call this efficacy, is mastery experiences. The next best source, so the most efficacious, the most effective, is reminding yourself of these experiences or watching others, right? And so I think we chatted a little bit about, like, you're in this position and maybe they're in a slump. It could be as simple as a mental highlight reel, right? Talking with your video director and saying, hey, look, No, I've got clips. Like you don't have the yips, right? You haven't forgot how to do this. All right, you're in a slump. What's the best way to get out of a slump? You have to keep swinging, whatever the case may be. But that reaffirmation that you belong here, you've done it here, is such a mentally triggering impulse to the confidence level, because it reaffirms that you have done all of this thing before. And it could be as simple as a highlight video. It could be as simple as putting together an accomplished, looking at your resume, right? As professionals, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's okay, and I'm going off the script, and I know viewers can't see this, but like I have a bulletin board right behind me in my office. When I got into academia, I was like, what the heck am I doing? Like I'm a coach. I know what I'm doing. And I've had days, welcome to, career and midlife, where they wear on you. And I purposely put a bulletin board of every thank you card that I've gotten written by a student or coach during my time here at the college. Because when I feel those moments, I'm not going to let it define my day, but I look up and it's as simple as that. And I say, you know what, I'm all right. Like I do know what I'm doing, or I did make an impact because I'm getting this evidence back into my life, into the circulation. And it could be as simple as that. But from the player's perspective, right, again, just like marriage, right, if we ask too many people their opinions, we start to figure out like, well, what do they really mean? Are they just trying to save face, and whatever the case may be? So I always go back to those elements of let's relive those past experiences. And if there's somebody like me, maybe they're a rookie or maybe they're a veteran, right? Spending time with those people and getting their lived experiences, because they're going to be able to offer some interesting insights on how maybe they got through it. But it moves beyond self-help. It moves beyond, again, watching a YouTube motivational video. It takes some work. And a big part of that is that self-reflection. But again, back to that confidence issue. You've been there. You've done it. How do we get you to do it again? Let's start microdosing these small wins and celebrating these bright spots and being very, very intentional about how we're going to be able to do those moving forward more.
And Adam, to piggyback back off that as well. One of the main things we've talked about with a lot of the young athletic trainers in pro baseball as guests on the show has been, talk us through your career like we did with you. Did you have like a welcome to pro ball moment, any struggles like that? And one of the main themes that I've seen is the young athletic trainer shows up at their first spring training. They're maybe a single A affiliate athletic trainer. They see veterans of the training room, team docs, people with World Series rings, people talking to groups they know. And you walk in that room and you're scared to speak up because you don't want to overstep. You want to fall in line. You want to do what you're supposed to as a new guy. But the other side of that is you need to make yourself visible. You need to show confidence. But when you're kind of in that shell, what advice would you have for athletic trainers who are, their first day as an intern? I want to showcase my knowledge and my skills, but I don't want to seem like the know-it-all.
Yeah, welcome to building yourself into a true professional. I think about an analogy we use all the time in coaching, right? Baptism by fire, right? You got to figure it out. Throw them in the deep end, right? Let's see what they can do. Well, we know from psychological research that if we throw them in the deep end for too long and we don't extend support soon enough, there is no way that they're going to recover. And that just eats you up, right? We see this in elite sports. They call it like the catastrophe theory, where you see it in golf, you see it in tennis. Like they're just hitting the net, they're just shanking things, and they just can't recover, right?
Yep.
So for the professional, go back to the analogy. I believe in baptism by fire, right? I think it's great. However, the older I've gotten and the more people I've worked with, I've learned to recognize if I'm throwing them in or I'm baptizing them by fire, I have the ultimate control of how hot and how long that flame hits them. And for the young professional, I think it's very important. You have to showcase your knowledge, but can you do it in a lower stakes environment? If the number one thing is a microdose moment of asking a question or giving a statement, are you doing that in a staff meeting compared to sitting with all the big chairs up top? Right? Oftentimes, just like training, we rush to max out. Young professionals, and I see it in coaches, right? They want to make a statement. They go right in there and they're speaking up at the team meetings, or they're going to the head coach or the manager. Oh, let's bring you back down a little bit to the reality. Finding those microdose moments of displaying their confidence in a lower stake environment, just like coaching, right? So from a coaching perspective, they might want to lead the group. Hey, how about we start with the warm up? Or how about we start with one exercise? How about we start with demonstration and instruction, and then we can do both? Everything when you're building a high quality professional and you're building your confidence, it goes back to the laws of progressive overload. Are you reaching too fast, too soon? Welcome to a hamstring strain or a pec tear, right? Are you doing too much too soon, too often? What are the base fundamentals? And I would say, again, microdose that. It's okay to go in the deep end, right? Test the waters a little bit. But are you going to be there as a mentor and as a preceptor to provide that support? And the idea about mentoring is it's not to remove those mistakes. You have to go through those mistakes to callous up and to understand, not just physically, but mentally what happens. But now you, again, start to provide maybe a little bit less support, or you start to raise the stakes. So I'll pause there, but I think a big part of that is it's okay to put them in those intense moments, and it's okay to speak up and advocate for yourself and building your career. But you've also got, again, go back to situational awareness. Is this the time to be that person? Or again, as you said, well, who's this guy? Like, who's this? Like, you've been out of school. You just got certified. You think you know athletic training? I mean, I get it, and I see it all the time.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. That the who is this guy? I assume we've all had that in us at some point. We're just like, we're nobody. What are we? We don't belong here. Imposter syndrome.
It's alive. And listeners, it never goes away. Okay.
Yeah.
It's always there. You can have the record of an Olympic level athlete, all the awards, all of the excellence. It never goes away. It's not as loud, and it doesn't come up as often.
Mm-hmm. And I think to your point, accepting that feeling is not going to go away is hugely important. Because we're always waiting for, once I figure this out, when I figure out my golf swing, I'm going to hit every fairway. You're never going to do it. It doesn't happen. Your body,
and there's
works
always
in different
something
ways.
else to worry about.
Sure, you just add to the pile. So that's great insight there from you. Well, Adam, you've worked with high performance, high performers across football, different sports, NFL for that matter. You speak to a number of different groups who take care of these high performing athletes. When it comes to athletic trainers you've been involved with and you've worked with and seen their work and their skills, what makes the best athletic trainer? Is there a trend or a characteristic that you've seen most of these people have in common?
Yeah, I think there's a few, and I've been very grateful. I've worked with a lot of great athletic training professionals over my career, and again, indebted to the first one I worked with as a student. But just like strength conditioning, and you can't just know the X's and O's, right? You can't know the modalities and the treatment interventions. If you don't have strong relation skills, it doesn't matter how much they know until they know, the athletes know how much you care, right? You have to be able to have conversations. You have to have that ability to develop relationships, because that is a cornerstone of intrinsic motivation, not only for you as a trainer, but also the athlete to recognize and appreciate you. So they have really strong relational skills. They have calm presence under pressure, right? My kids would say they don't go into crash out mode. Okay. Things will happen. You're going to see some gnarly stuff, right? Do you have the ability to regulate? Now, this is emotional regulation, that when you see something happen, whether it's a setback in rehab or an injury that you see out onto the field, can you remain calm? A big one, and this one drives me nuts, not from the athletic training perspective, but we're very lucky to work with coaches. But if you can have confidence without ego, that is what's really, really beneficial for any type of young, older, veteran professional, because obviously with experience comes confidence, but a lot of times with confidence comes that ego, right? The need to prove, the need to show others how much you know and what you've done, et cetera. So if you have that confidence, great. Just make sure you keep that ego in check. Another one, now more than ever with high performance, is the willingness to collaborate. Right? Why are we hiding behind our desk and guarding our pencils and keeping things top secret? And I understand that from an organizational standpoint, right? We're not sharing information with that team. We're not sharing information with that team until we might need to, whatever the case may be. But are you willing to collaborate? And are you willing to learn, right? As a strength conditioning coach, I want to spend as much time as I can with my medical professionals, because if they're doing things that I can actually have a hand in, I can offset their workload and they can enhance their boundaries and so forth. So the willingness to collaborate, again, with nutritionists, with sports psychology professionals, et cetera. And I think this is old as time, right? Do you genuinely care for the person, not just the athlete? And it's a world of transactions. It's a world of bonuses and millions of dollars. I get that. But if you want better buy-in, are you asking them about their lives, right? Are you keeping notes on this? Do you truly understand and appreciate them for who they are because that's only going to improve everything else from that. And I think a lot of times, and I've seen this at the college level in coaching, you're just a number and you're just another one added to the roster that's going to help us win another game. And true care, athlete-centered care does not fall for athlete. It's that human-centered model.
Yeah, I love the quote you had right there. It doesn't matter how much you know if the athletes you're caring for don't know how much you care. I think that's awesome. And that goes back to those relationships and the trust that kind of the athletic training profession is kind of there for, is you're serving others. You're behind the scenes in the most cases, you're the support staff for that athlete. And, you know, our goal here is obviously to advocate for the profession, educate people who are upcoming. And I think, you know, it's been awesome to hear you chat about that today. Well, Adam, you know, a couple more questions here. But to begin, you know, the younger athletic trainer out there, they hear you talking, they want to improve how they support athletes mentally. They don't know where to start. Really quick, you know, the most basic place to start to improve how you work with athletes and their mental performance.
Stop talking. Stop talking so much. Not to you, but stop rushing to fill the space. Stop trying to fix athletes. Number one, athletes are not broken, so thus they do not need to be fixed, right? And this stems from counseling, but listen more than trying to fix, right? Truly intentionally listen. It's going to take time and it takes practice. And when you get a chance to talk, like I said earlier, ask better questions. That's always a big help there. And then learn the basic mental performance concepts, right? Understand the sources of confidence, understand how anxiety can improve performance, understand how anxiety can debilitate performance. Having a very basic background in sports psychology concepts can really help you understand when things start to go south, or most importantly, when they're going well. And in the coaching world, we are paid to correct, to critique, to instruct. And it's like, you know what? When's the last time you gave them feedback on something great, right? So whether you're managing a big group, and it's the same thing in athletic training, right? Truly acknowledging that. And I come back to this one in terms of communication, right? Obviously learning basic mental performance concepts, but also reflecting on your own communication. I've said this a lot before, is reach out when you've clocked out. It is your job, Sam, as an athletic trainer, to give them a high five, slap them on the tail, tell them a good job, get them a Gatorade, whatever the case may be. But you know what matters is when you're not in the facility and in the 9 to 5 or the 3 to 11, and that one little text message outside of hours, that one little sync up, that one little thing, I saw this, I thought of you, man, that is powerful. And again, understanding your boundaries and setting those times appropriately. But when you reach out, when you've effectively clocked out, you are reminding them that you truly care about them, and that, guess what? You were thinking about them when you didn't have to, right? Now, obviously, you want to, again, regulate those boundaries as needed. I'm not saying you got to send private texts to all the guys on the roster and this and that, but it means so much more because now they're looking at you as a true ally instead of somebody that's just there to provide support. And so if you can do that, reflect on your communication. And then if you want to be an effective practitioner, right, going back to those building blocks of relationships, right? If you're a new athletic trainer in the field, do you have a little notebook where you're writing down these little things? You're not interrogating them, but can you come back to those concepts? If they tell you about that they had a wedding or there's a birth of a child, right? Are you following up on that, right? How are things going? It may seem so small, and so is this really it? It is. And those are the great foundations of building any type of great relationship.
Yeah, that's a great point about thinking of someone when you're not supposed to be. And it kind of reminds me of my own personal experience where, someone who wasn't invited to my wedding sent a gift and a card. They didn't need to, and I'll never forget it.
Definitely not. I'm not sending a gift.
Yeah, they didn't need to. They weren't even invited. They were a friend of the family, and they sent a gift. And I'm like, wow, this person was.
And how good did that make you feel, regardless if you like the gift or not?
And that's something I hope to do for other people because it was such a kind of touching moment. I really don't know the person well, but I thought so much of them and their character. Like you said, thinking of someone when it's not mandated, I think can go a long way, and that's really impactful there.
And this goes back, and I know we won't have time to chat about, but briefly in Utah, we talked about these laws of influence and the reciprocity, right? Again, it's not understanding the dark side of like, how do I get what I want from other people? But now, aren't you more inclined a little bit to maybe follow that person or connect with that person?
Absolutely.
Because they did that one little thing that they didn't have to. You're always going to remember that. And so if they ever need anything,
you're there.
You're there.
Yeah, very well said. Well, Adam, really appreciate you coming on. To wrap up today, talk to me a bit about what excites you the most about this growing profession of mental performance in sports, the future of where it's going, and its growing role alongside the athletic trainers.
It is integration, and this is a call to action for all the other sports psychology professionals in there. And while, again, I'm very lucky, I have backgrounds in everywhere. A lot of people think that you need to be very niche down, right? You need to be the specialist. And I always go back to, right, jack of all trades, master of none. But you know what the jack of all trades always has is they always have a job, and they always understand the language that's being said in these tables. And I built my career on being a specialized generalist. And big part of that is integration and collaboration. So mental performance professionals, if you are not at practice connecting with athletes, go. If you're not going to the athletic training room and working with the AATs and the PTs and the other medical professionals, get there. Do not hide behind your closed door telling everybody in the organization that you're meeting with somebody. You and I both know you're not doing that all day, right? Spending time at the dining hall or wherever the food is, right? Sitting with them on the bus, whatever the case may be, right? It comes down to the integration and collaboration because, again, many hands make light work. My grandmother always said that. Imagine if we had all the hands working together, the trust in the relationships is better. The athlete is more centered in this holistic high performance program. And then from an athletic training perspective, your job is not just focused on clearance. Like, are they cleared, right? They're focused on readiness. And imagine athletic trainers, right? You had somebody that you trusted in the weight room. You had somebody you trusted in the nutrition and dining hall. You had somebody you trusted when the space between the ears isn't as clear as it used to be. But also, you're doing this work every day as it is, athletic trainers, right? Find the language and the confidence to support it to do even better, and you're going to continue to do awesome things.
Great advice there, Adam. And again, always appreciate your time. It's always a pleasure chatting with you about athletic training and all things sports performance. Wish you happy holidays, happy New Year, and we hope to have you on again here soon.
Right back at you, Sam. Thanks so much.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Inside Athletic Training Podcast. For more information about PBATS and athletic training, visit pbats.com. See you next time.